You're listening to the Wired for Impact podcast.
You know, sound and music frequencies have been used to steer the masses for about a century now. So back in the 1930s, the Rothschild-Rockefeller Alliance, they began funding scientific studies examining how musical frequencies can prepare the masses for war. So in 1938, there was a theatrical designer and sound engineer. His name was Harold Burris Meyer. And what he did is he began developing sound processing techniques that would control the emotional response of audiences and create mass hysteria. And Dr. Leonard Horowitz, he writes in the book of 528, it's called The Prosperity Key of Love. He says, the Rockefeller Foundation archives showed their research is focused on psychotronic warfare, physiological stress induction, negative affective emotional arousal, mass persuasion, herd behavior, and population control. People's bodies would bioenergetically entrain to the musical frequencies and electronically engineered sound effects that would be most emotionally charged, causing people to act in certain programmable ways. So it's no coincidence that as this Rothschild-Rockefeller Alliance was figuring out ways to use sound technology to steer the masses, that the international standard tuning of A was changed to 440 hertz. So let me go into that a little bit more because this is huge. In 1939, again, the Rockefeller-Rothschild Alliance, what they did is they funded Joseph Goebbels, the Nazi propagandist. Now, at the same time, the Rockefellers were aligned with IG Farben, which is the German chemical and pharmaceutical giant. Well, together, they funded the military buildup of Hitler's regime. So at the same time, you had Joseph Goebbels with Radio Berlin organizing a conference in London to change the standard tuning of A. Now, prior to that point in time, the standard tuning of A was set to 435 hertz, and that was done at a conference in Vienna in 1889. But then, like I mentioned, Goebbels, he wanted to change the standard tuning of A to 440 hertz. So what Radio Berlin did is they got a hold of the British Standard Association and they asked them to organize a conference to change the standard tuning of A. And this meeting really was a setup, you know, in which the powers that be had control of the outcome. So what they did is they didn't invite any of the French musicians who were mostly opposed to the shift to 440 hertz. And then the organizers of the conference, they interviewed ahead of time the physicists, the instrument makers, the musicians, and the engineers. And those that were opposed to 440 hertz, they didn't invite to the conference. So it's no wonder that a result of the conference is the standard tuning of A was changed to 440 hertz. Now, this happened June 1939. Just months before World War II broke out. And that's no coincidence because 440 hertz is a destructive frequency. What it does is it retrains our thoughts towards disruption, disharmony, and disunity. And it can stimulate our brain to have this disharmonious resonance. And that eventually can lead to disease and war. And let me give you a couple of examples of the destructive nature of 440. So these are research studies published more recently. So in 2021, published in the Journal of Ecological Engineering, what researchers did is they looked at the effects of sublethal and lethal high frequency sound exposure on water fleas. So they measured the impact of 432 hertz and 440 hertz on fertility and heart rate. And what they found is that the water fleas exposed to 440 hertz developed infertility and had a dramatic decrease in heart rate. But even more alarming was that within weeks of that study, all the water fleas exposed to 440 hertz died. Then another study also published in 2021, this one was with humans, and this was published in the International Journal of Human Sciences. What they did is they had people listen to music tuned to 432 and 440 hertz, and then they measured their mood. And what they found is that people reported an increase in negative mood after listening to 440 hertz. And that finding was particularly pronounced within men. So now if we take a step back and we kind of look at the big picture, remember I talked about the Nephilim agenda. The goal is total domination of humanity. Well, one way to do that is you need to have a depopulation plan. Well, how do you depopulate? You create infertility and you lead to war. Well, 440 hertz does both of these things. And so Leonard Horowitz, he makes an interesting conclusion. He says, the intensive research into the military and commercial value of compelling herd behavior with music to induce stress, promote diseases, and suppress spirituality has enabled the world's wealthiest people to exercise cultural control through programming. So not only have we been programmed by these harmful frequencies, but the frequencies that can actually benefit us physically, emotionally, and spiritually, those have been suppressed. But thankfully, more and more people are awakening to the beauty of tuning A to 444 hertz. In fact, Dr. Horowitz talks about, when you shift your instrument, tuning it to 444, what happens is not only is it acoustically more pleasing, it actually stimulates us kinesthetically, and it can revitalize us spiritually. Also, scientists use that frequency to repair DNA. So when you tune an instrument to 444 hertz, and this is much easier with stringed instruments, piano, keyboards. The wind instruments and the brass, it's very difficult. You have to remake the instruments. Mm-hmm. But when you do tune your instruments to 444, 4 of the solfeggio tones come forth. So G is 396 hertz. G sharp is 417 hertz. And then C, middle C is 528. And E flat is 639. So then why is that important? Well, the solfeggio frequencies are known to have some healing properties. And I'll talk specifically about 528 hertz. It's actually known as the miracle tone. And this is the frequency that scientists use to repair DNA. Also, when God spoke creation into existence, that 528 hertz was key to sustaining life. You think about the sun's frequency actually vibrates at 528 hertz. And so chlorophyll, which is this optimal energy transducer, it absorbs the sun's frequencies and then converts that into oxygen for every cell in our body. Well, that oxygen vibrates at 528 hertz. So you can see how it's this life-giving frequency. But what the enemy has done is he has suppressed this information because music and sound is so vital to his battle strategy. And really, music and sound have been weaponized to mutate our DNA. And as I mentioned, the Nephilim agenda, the goal is to defile our human genome. And one way they're doing that is through these advancements in biotechnology.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Wired for Impact. If you're interested in creating and expanding your impact, be sure to visit us online at impactnow.com.